Then Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. The weekend comes, my cycle hums, ready to race for you.
Whoa. Let's start this over. So one of the few perks of being a tall CrossFit athlete is the natural ability of being good at rowing, right? But interestingly enough, the fact that you're good at rowing has less to do with your height, but more so with your weight. Of course, the taller you are, the better your levers are, and the more of a mechanical advantage do you have. But did you know that at indoor rowing competitions on a Concept 2 rower, the ones that you see in a CrossFit gym all over the world, that people compete in different weight classes, not height classes, but weight classes? That's because the heavier you are, the more power you can put into the machine and the more momentum you can create with the rower. And of course, as taller athletes, we put more weight on the scale and we should be better than the smaller CrossFit athletes. But how come that still the smaller guys in class or at competitions finish in front of you? It can't be just all about body composition, right? So for me, being good and efficient at rowing in CrossFit workouts or in isolated tests comes down to three components. The first one is rowing technique. The second one is simply strength and your engine. And the third one is strategy. I'm not going to go into detail with the latter two because simply this would be too much for this video. But I want to show you today some of the most common mistakes that I see people make at the gym and that I also made in the past when it comes to rowing technique, that actually, once I figured out how to not make these mistakes, to be better, to be faster, and to be more efficient, and that's what it all comes down to at CrossFit workouts. But if you want me to show you some strategy tips that I follow for isolated tests or for workouts where rowing is included, leave a comment below, because there is nothing worse than when you go into a 5K row and after the first 500 meters you're completely blown up because you came out too hot and you have to suffer through the next 15 minutes of the test. Alright, so let's dive in. The first thing that I want to touch on, and the first component when it comes to rowing technique and the setup, is the actual foot strap and the foot plate, where you place your feet in the rowing machine. As I mentioned before, rowing has less to do with your height, but with the power you can actually put into the machine and with the momentum you can create. Having the right foot position helps you a lot to actually generate that momentum into the rowing machine. Ideally, you want to have your full foot on that foot plate, not a little bit over or a little bit under. You want to have the full foot on the plate to actually be able to push with your whole body weight into the foot plate. So I wear a size 13 and my foot plate is usually at a 6. So that's a little bit of a reference point for you. Another thing that I want to make sure is that the strap is actually at the bottom of my shoelaces on my shoe. That's a good indicator anytime you want to adjust your foot straps, you want to adjust your foot plate. So play around with that. Make sure that your full foot is actually on the plate. It should feel natural in a flexed position on your foot and in the extended position. You don't want to feel like being in an unnatural angle and don't want to worry about your ankle mobility being a limitation when it comes to your rowing. The next thing is actual rowing position, and that is probably where most people waste most of their energy when it comes to the rowing machine. Their positions and the movement sequence is actually really important to generate as much power as possible in the most efficient way, right? We want to be as efficient as possible on the rower so we actually can save some energy while still being quick, so we can jump off the rower and jump into the next part of the workout, like thrusters when you do jacky or any other movements when you do like a chipper. So our starting position is always the same. We start with our back straight and we start with our arms extended on the handlebar. So from that starting position, there are two things that we could do wrong right away. So the first thing is that we actually pull too early with our arms. What happens then is that we lose all the momentum. We don't put as much power into the machine, and we also call that short pulls. You actually see that in a lot of general CrossFit classes, that people are rowing as hard as they can, as fast as they can, and they just still take forever to actually get off the rower and finish behind anyone that is actually experienced in rowing and has a good technique. Always make sure that you actually keep your arms extended as long as possible and finish the pulls completely up to your chest. I'm gonna get into the end position in a minute. But then there is the other problem. The general sequence, as I just mentioned, is legs, hips, arms. And when you type in rowing technique on YouTube, you see a lot of people teaching that. And I don't think it actually is the correct and the best way to teach rowing technique. The problem I found with this is when you focus too much on pushing with your legs first, your upper body and your arms, they might be straight, but they are not under tension. So what happens is you push with your legs, you shoot your hips back, and automatically what will happen is you see that a lot of times when you do deadlifts, for example. Your back will round up and you will have to pull from a position that is more taxing on your lower back than it actually has to be. So I always like to compare it with a deadlift. With a deadlift, you actually pull the barbell, you hear a little click, and then you start your pull off the floor. And you do the same thing with the rower. Before you actually start pushing with your legs into the rowing machine, you need to brace your upper back and your arms first to actually get tension on the cable. Same thing with the deadlift. You want to get tension on the barbell before you actually pull it off the ground. And once you have that tension, then you can push with your legs, then you can open your hips, and then you can pull with your arms. But where does the handlebar go? A lot of times I see it that people pull on the handlebar and finish their stroke actually at their belly button or just right below their chin in their neck area. I'm telling you, play around with it, experiment with it a little bit. You have to find what works best for you. But for me, the best position to actually finish the stroke is right in the chest area. By pulling the handlebar to my chest, I'm actually engaging my biceps, but also my traps and my upper back way more. And because those muscles are usually stronger than your upper traps or your shoulder muscles, it will be less fatiguing. And that comes into play when rowing is part of another workout, right? When you have to do handstand push-ups after the row, for example. You don't want to exhaust your shoulders and your traps by pulling the handlebar always to your neck. You want to make sure that you actually engage the right muscles, your traps, your upper back, your biceps, to save some energy. Oh boy, the next one. Damper settings. I think that's the most favorite topic on the internet for everyone that is involved in rowing. What is the damper? What does it do? How should you set it? I'm gonna link an article below in the description of the Concept 2 website that actually explains what the damper does and what the settings mean and explain it really, really well. But for this video, you should know that setting the damper to the highest settings doesn't necessarily mean that you will go faster. It's like riding a bike, right? You have different gears, and when you go into a higher gear, you can go fast, and if you are in a lower gear, you can go fast. It all depends how much power you actually put into the machine. So for me personally, I never use a damper setting anywhere higher than 8. There is no way for me, when rowing is part of a CrossFit workout, that I row anything higher than a 6 or max a 7. The higher your damper setting, the more energy you will have to put into the machine to actually get the flywheel going. And that is all energy that you might need later. But also if the damper setting is too low, you will have to row at a much higher cadence to actually hold a certain pace. So let me show you what I mean. In this case, I wanted to row 150 meters and I wanted to hold a 148 pace on 500 meters. The first try that I did was on damper setting 1. The second try is on damper setting 10. As you can see, with the lower damper setting, my stroke rate is much, much higher. I have to row on a much higher cadence to actually hold that pace, which will eventually, in a CrossFit workout, lead to my heart rate spiking, my heart rate going up, and that's the last thing that you want to do, hopping off the rower, and then you have to catch your breath first for 5 minutes. But then with the highest damper setting, on a 10 for example, you will have to pull much harder. You have to put much more power into the machine to actually hold that pace. Yes, your stroke rate will be lower, but a damper setting 10 doesn't really do the job because you exhaust yourself so much, you have to pull so hard that you will actually fatigue your muscles way too much to continue to work out in an efficient way. You should probably play around with the damper settings in CrossFit class. Every time there is rowing programmed in a workout or as a test, play around with the damper settings, see what you feel comfortable with, see how it affects your heart rate, see how it affects your muscles and your fatigue, and how you actually feel after you get off the rower. That will give you a good indication what damper settings you should actually use moving forward for different distances and for different workouts. Eventually you will find your sweet spot, and then you can actually think about cadence. I talked about cadence and the stroke rate quite a bit in this video. So once you know your damper settings and what you feel comfortable with on shorter rows and longer rows, you can actually think about how fast do you want to row. Obviously, people think that the faster you pull, the faster you move the boat, right? But if you've ever been on an actual rowing boat, that is not always the case. The more you put the paddle into the water, the more resistance you create with the water, and it slows your boat down. So you actually want to keep your stroke rate fairly low, but have strong pulls. And I actually noticed that myself the other day when I retested my 5K row. In the past, when I tried to hold a certain pace, and I can talk about strategy in a different video, but on a 5K row, for example, I wanted to hold an average pace of a 144 throughout the majority of the workout. In the past, I would try to row at like 26 to 30 strokes per minute. I didn't care how fast I was rowing. I needed to just hold this pace. When I did that, it left me with nothing in the tank for the last 500 meters, where you actually want to push the machine and where you want to go all out. Because my heart rate was just simply too high and I was redlining. But the last time I tested the 5K again, I wanted to hold a 144 again, but I intentionally took a break at the end of every stroke. So every time you finish the stroke, you can actually breathe and then go into the next pull, which makes a massive difference over the 15 to 18 minutes that you're gonna sit on the rower for this 5K. But it also left me with enough in the tank for the last 500 meters to actually sprint them, and on the last 500 meters actually hold a 130 pace. So you see that quick break that I take after every stroke? But obviously, to hold the same pace with that lower stroke rate, you have to put way more power into the machine with every stroke. And you will see that at the CrossFit Games or any high level elite competition as well. When there's a row programmed, unless it is a 1K time trial or some sort of sprint, the athletes won't go hard on that rower. I rarely see them going over 22 strokes per minute when they row. You always see them take their time, take a breather, because they know they have to do so much other stuff after that row that they don't want to blow up. They don't want to like waste all of their energy, but their power output is still so high that their times are still incredibly fast, right? All right, so no matter if you are a tall athlete or a smaller athlete, I hope these tips help you become a faster and more efficient rower and maybe help you not hate the rowing machine as much anymore. Actually, as part of the video, I'm planning on doing a 1K time trial because I haven't done that in 2 years, and it would be interesting to see what my times are and actually let you guys be part of it. But because I'm running a half marathon in 3 days, I said I'm not going to do that, because if you ever did a 1K row, you know it hurts and it actually haunts you for the next couple days. But instead, I thought of a little challenge. Until June 15th, everyone who posts their 1K rowing time in the comments below this video with a link, obviously, to a YouTube video, because I want to see proof that you actually wrote the times you wrote, automatically enters a giveaway for a year subscription to Wattproof. I'm not partnered with that. I just think this app is amazing. You see, you can connect them to your Concept 2 rower. It's like a super handy workout tool to actually help you analyze your workout, analyze your movement patterns. So if you want to win a year-long subscription to Wattproof Pro, make sure you row a 1K until June 15th. Post your time in the comments below with a link to your video so I can check it out and maybe feature you in one of the future videos, and then you automatically enter the giveaway. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, because next week I actually show you what it feels like and what it looks like to run a half marathon without any proper running training. I ran twice in the last 2 weeks, and I'm gonna run a half marathon in 4 days. And I tell you, the 2 times that I ran so far, which wasn't even close to a half marathon, hurt. Until then, see you in the next video.